All right, you knew this was coming. Let's get started. Hey guys, welcome back to another History Teacher Reacts video with Mr. Terry as I continue my search for historical knowledge here on the internet. Alright, with all the talk of viruses and the COVID-19 and all of that stuff that's going on right now, I thought what better time than ever to learn about the most recent, largest pandemic that has happened in history, which was the Great Spanish Flu that kind of overlapped with World War One, which killed millions of people across the world. And I know people talk about it too, and they try to look at, like worst case scenarios of things. And this is one thing that would get popped up because, it's in somewhat recent memory in a way. But the Spanish flu. So I thought we'd check this out. And among all the videos you can find out about the Spanish flu, I saw that Simple History did one recently. And I thought that'd be great. I love their channel and want to check out what they have here. So let's go and get started. Now, if you like this video, go down below. Link will be down below there, so you can go check it out and give them a like and subscribe. And if you haven't subbed to my channel yet, I'd love to have you around too. So open invitation for you. All right, let's go ahead and get started with how. This title is How to Survive the Spanish Flu, 1918 to 1920. All right, let's do this.
This episode is sponsored by Ground News. Judge the truth for yourself. Ground News is the app that will accompany you in your journey to get trustworthy information. It will let you see how the media has processed their information and what's their political point of view. This allows you to have a complete awareness of what you're reading via a political spectrum tool. Geographic filters enable you to see the news
good timing for
usually seeing from other
ad
countries.
Promotion, huh?
And with all the latest information coming out in the news about the coronavirus, you'll be able to find out the accurate statistics and reliable facts and watch the story as it evolves over time. The Ground News app is available free in both the Apple app and Google Play Store.
Perfect ad placement,
Click the description below or go to check.ground.news/simplehistory to get the app now. With the latest ongoing coronavirus in the news, let's see how people dealt with the Spanish flu in 1918.
Great idea. I love this idea of, hey, how did people treat pandemics of recent history? And then how is that unfolding here right now?
How did you survive the Spanish flu? 1918 to 1920. There you lay in your hospital bed, bitter that you hadn't been able to get over to Europe in time to join the last big push against Imperial Germany.
Yeah, oh darn.
End World War I. You had attempted to join the U.S. Army a few months before in mid-1918 at the age of 16 years old, but was turned down to being too young and not having parental consent. Not one to be deterred, using a forged birth certificate and a forged father's signature on the parental consent form, you managed to get into a Red Cross military detachment as an ambulance driver. But then you feel your luck changes for the worse as you go down with what seems like a particularly nasty strain of seasonal flu that's going around, and you end up being hospitalized for a few weeks. Crucially, this delays you being shipped out to the front line in faraway France. So when you finally get there by ship transporter, the war has been over for a month. You'd think you would be safe now, as you don't become one of the 116,516 Americans killed in the brutal fighting that was the First World War. But unknown to you, a different kind of horror is awaiting you in France.
So the famous thing, of course, was that more people are going to die, especially like Americans. I mean, it depends on what country you are, but in a lot of places, more people died of this influenza than did the war. And I know what's talked about a lot is the conditions of World War I exacerbated the spread of this disease, because warfare is always a means to transmit disease with a lot of unsanitary conditions, a lot of close contact. And since this is, the 20th century, global connectivity is all over the place. So perfect recipe for the spread of a viral disaster like this.
For this year's flu strain that it's suggested originated in China earlier in the year has spread across America, mutated into a much more lethal variety, and now has its epicenter of infection in France. In those three countries, the news about influenza was suppressed by censorship and self-censorship to maintain wartime morale. The news about the virus spread widely when King Alphonse XIII of neutral Spain fell ill. This flu strain became known as Spanish flu, and it was mistaken.
That sucked for Spain to get whether it originated there or not. It gets named after you, so everyone just thinks you're some disgusting viral nation.
Thought to have come from that country. It would eventually infect a third of the world's population over the next 18 months.
That's I didn't know, to be honest, it was that extensive. 1/3 of the world's population. Wait, and how long?
It would eventually infect a third of the world's population over the next 18 months.
18 months, so a year and a half. Okay, I know they say with these types of things historically, they'll come and then they'll kind of recede for a while. I think during summer months, and then often come back, and the virus strains kind of evolve into sometimes stronger elements. I've heard that before, but I don't know. I'm not a scientist.
Kill an estimated 675,000 Americans and kill between 50 to 100 million people worldwide.
I didn't know it was that many either.
And kill between 50 to 100 million people worldwide.
And it was millions. I did not know it got to triple digits of millions. 100 million people. That's unbelievable.
This is the modern-day equivalent of the entire populations of the capital cities of Abu Dhabi, Beijing, Bangkok, Berlin, Brussels, Copenhagen, Lima, Lisbon, London, Madrid, Manila, Moscow, Paris, Riyadh, Seoul, Tokyo, Vienna, Warsaw, and Washington, D.C., all dying from the infection. Globally, more people were killed by the Spanish flu than in the First World War.
There you go. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's way more than the First World War, which is like 15 million. I mean, it depends on a lot of numbers, what you consider, but this is so overlooked in history. I mean, wars are people are far more into studying that, and diseases, it's like people only talk about it so much. I mean, talk about the Black Death of the 14th century in Europe and across Eurasia, but this is something that when you hear about those numbers, you definitely think in education and just, I guess, in modern culture, you would hear about this more. But having it within the setting of World War I, you can see is overshadowed that, and a lot of people just kind of blend it in that it's like we'll just put it like as part of World War I casualties, which you can kind of do. But I've heard numbers of that where it's like, all right, you also need to throw in the Spanish flu.
But initially, you were not unduly worried about this outbreak and the increasing number of people around you getting it. For you had survived it already, and even the U.S. President Woodrow Wilson had been violently ill with it, but had gone on to make a full recovery. So you and your coworkers are not worried at the moment. The symptoms at first were much like normal flu: fever, fatigue, muscle and joint pain, headache, and lack of appetite, but then often developed into a bacterial pneumonia that caused the lungs to be destroyed and made the patient violently cough up blood. This led the Spanish flu to have a mortality rate which was thought to be as high as 20% of those infected.
Wow.
But then as the death...
Yeah, that's such a high rate. I mean, people talk about the flu today where it's like 0.1%, right? And why, like, the Spanish flu, again, was very different. People just, I think sometimes it seems like historically just kind of group the flu together. It's just the flu, when it's a lot of different strains, and influenza is a very, can be a very broad thing and can change. And a lot of diseases I know we've heard about in the last few decades are like strains of the flu, but may not get called that.
Death toll starts to rapidly rise and morgues begin to overflow with dead bodies. You start to realize this is more than just your normal everyday flu. So what's the best way for you to avoid getting this terrible strain of the flu virus? Well, even if you got an earlier version of the flu, it didn't ensure you would not get the latter, much more dangerous one.
So yeah, that's what they say too. Like, yeah, just because you've had the flu doesn't mean you can't get other strains of the flu. And usually with these ones that are, it seems like historically a big pandemic, is that it's something new, so that you don't have the immune system for it, or a lot of people don't, or at least it's harder to fight that off because you're biologically have not had as much experience to it. Though it's new strains, not the same thing that has happened before.
Hoping the government-imposed quarantine would work, though a good and sensible measure, could not be relied upon as this flu strain spreads so fast. By the time its lethal danger was fully recognized, it was far too late and had spread to the four corners of the globe. But if you could avoid public places and limit physical contact with people, this could greatly improve your chances of surviving this pandemic. Washing your hands, especially after you've been out in public, was very important as the flu virus could live on certain surfaces for up to 48 hours and up to 12 hours on clothes. Though bear in mind that everyday soap is of limited effectiveness, as it's good for cleaning dirt away but not necessarily good at sanitizing. Resist dosing yourself with too many painkillers like aspirin, as that could surprisingly save your life too. For at the height of the pandemic, there was a spike in deaths from accidental aspirin overdoses, as people didn't know or fully understand the correct dosage. So
people freak out with some kind of treatment and self-medicate and just they don't know. They're not a doctor. They don't know how to actually treat yourself. So, I guess if you do get sick on something, make sure you follow the directions. They're there for a reason, right?
The information on any medicine you're taking is a must. Sadly, a lot of things you could do to help your survival were either not understood in your day and age, or simply weren't available as they would be in the next century. You would think a face mask would help, but to be really effective, you needed to use a certain type that fits around the mouth and neck tightly. The most common cause of death from Spanish flu was from secondary bacterial infection, chiefly pneumonia. In the future, this can be treated highly effectively by antibiotics, along with a saline drip to rehydrate you. But this was no option, as neither were available to you in 1919 at the height of the pandemic. Also, vaccination against this disease was not an option for you either. Though there had been successful vaccines for smallpox and rabies, vaccines were still in their infancy, and it wasn't until the 1950s that viruses and how to combat them were starting to be really understood. So, if you did become ill, bed rest and drinking lots of fluids were your best way to a full recovery. As for you, you did survive the outbreak, and went on to win Academy Awards for animated movies like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day. For you are...
Who is this?
Walt Elias Disney.
All right.
Big thanks to Ground News, the app that helps you keep up with the trustworthy news regarding the coronavirus. Check out the Ground News app via the link down below.
I like that. That's on the right here. If you can see my mouse, that's the old plague doctor. You're glad you're not getting treated for illness with somebody with this. So it's the mask with the big beak, right? So it comes down out here, and they put stuff in it that's supposed to help block the germs or whatever, spices and fragrant things that block you with that. But now it's more like the guy in the middle, the hazmat suit, pretty much there. All right then. So I just wanted to get a little bit more history, especially with the context of things that are going on right now with coronavirus and just kind of maybe it'll help you guys alert you to the history of diseases. I mean, disease is such a big player in history, right? It happens so much. I mean, go to the plague, of course, but you go back and there's the plague outbreaks and stuff that happened in places like ancient Rome dealt with it, and the Greeks dealt with it during the Peloponnesian War, especially like the Athenians, for example, when they were fighting Sparta. People were dying from that, and it sprouts up here and there in different forms and things like that. But yeah, it's played a big role. A huge example would be how immunity works, right? So historically, when people develop far away from each other, they are exposed to certain germs depending on their geography. As you know, famously with the pre-Columbian American civilizations, that when the Spanish and other Europeans come over, they carry germs that don't affect themselves, right? Because they've had a immunity of living with specific germs. Specifically, in that case, it was germs that you would get exposed to from animals, right? Domesticated animals. But of course, over many centuries and generations, I should say, of living in close proximity to animals, Europeans had developed immunity to those strains. And then, of course, when those germs come along with the travelers coming across the Atlantic to the Aztecs, the Inca, etc., those immunities, of course, did not exist amongst those people, which led to the majority of death, unfortunately, for those people. Good, probably 90% of native populations end up dying largely from disease there. So, you get that sort of thing. And then, today, obviously, it advanced a lot with medicine, but, always learning, these things as we go about, the power disease plays in history and those sort of things. So, anyways, I just thought it'd be a good time to kind of visit that sort of thing, especially just for myself, because obviously as a teacher, I want to, people talk about this stuff, and as a history teacher, I feel like, I can really use it as a teaching opportunity. For history, and talk about the history of disease and stuff like that, and how it plays out, and lessons, I guess, in a way, just in fact, like, how did people handle it in the past, and how is that in the future, and or the present or the future, and how they compare and they contrast, right, and that sort of thing. So, anyways, hope you enjoyed this. Just from learning about how this had been in history. They try to make somewhat light of it, even though it's such a devastating thing. 50 to 100 million. By the way, that's a large number, not just in total, but that's a very vague number. Like 50 to 100 million people. 50 million of they don't really know. And again, it can be hard probably to get cause of death for all these things. And how do you know it's that strain of virus, especially when you're talking about 1918 to 1920, when the medical diagnoses are going to be so much harder than they are now. But that's an amazing number to think about in the context of the wars. World War One gets overshadowed a lot. So anyway, hopefully you just kind of enjoyed this. If you like this original video, Simple History is an awesome channel. I love their stuff. They do great things. So make sure you go down below, click in the description, and click on it, and that'll take you to this video. Give them a like, give them a subscribe, give them a view, sub to them as well. And I think you'll like what you find over there. So, all right, lastly, if you haven't subbed to my channel, love to have you around. Hit that sub button, enable notifications, so you can come hang out with us in live premieres and live streams. Join our Discord server, which is down below. You can join that and get interacting with the thousands of people that we have on our server, and all kinds of topics you can talk about with history. Thanks again, everyone that's supporting the channel in all the ways that you can. Appreciate that. And once again, we'll see you soon. Bye.